Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri, and our next guest is the rightfully acclaimed actor from such films as Jesus' Son, Almost Famous, 20th Century Women, Where Do You Go, Bernadette, and now you can see Billy Crudup in Apple Plus's first big foray into streaming, The Morning Show, where Crudup plays a hilariously smarmy TV news exec looking to shake things up at his network's flagship morning show. Let's take a look at The Morning Show.
8 seconds to you. Cue her.
Good morning. I'm bringing you some sad and upsetting news. And while I don't know the details of the allegations,
She's throwing me under the bus.
Mitch Kessler, my co-host and partner of 15 years, was fired today.
You!
We are facing the biggest crisis in our history.
My life just ended for no good reason.
We're in the middle of an epic rebirth. Her sell-by date expired years ago. I want you to start grooming some new people.
I don't fit the mold.
What mold is that?
Any mold, really? Your show sucks.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
barely
you.
news.
I want wardrobe tests, screen tests, makeup tests. We need a contract. Where's legal?
Ready? I'm ready. Most people want to trust that the person that is telling them about the world is an honest person. Like you.
Yes.
Your words spoke to America. People are noticing. They want more.
Watching a beloved woman's breakdown is timeless American entertainment.
I just need to be able to control the narrative so that I'm not written out of it.
You stole my life. You left me in the woods with a pack of wolves.
You just think I'm gonna do this?
This chair could be yours.
I don't want your job.
Oh, honey, well,
You walk out that door, you are never gonna get back in.
the part you guys never seem to realize is that you don't have the power anymore. And frankly, I've let you bozos handle this long enough. We are doing this my way. What happened to your TV?
We had a disagreement.
Everybody, please welcome the great Billy Crudup. Let's hear it.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you all. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here.
It is my pleasure.
I was telling you this in the green room, and I might as well say it on stage as well. The morning show is great. You are my favorite part of the show, though. I love watching you play a character like this, and I love you. It seems like getting the chance to do every line the way that you see how that line should be said. And I'm wondering how much of that is calculated beforehand and how much of that is in the moment discovering the sort of presence and chemistry of that character.
Well, thank you very much. I suppose with some characters, you read them and you have an instinctual response to them. And what typically happens with me as I'm reading something is if I start to drift away in my mind, imagine the character walking around in space, how they communicate with people, how they observe their relationships, then I know that creatively, intuitively, I've got some connection to that character in the story. And that happened with this guy. So I had my own personal take on it that wasn't really articulated yet. Just on reading it, it was more of an intuitive feel that I thought maybe this guy thinks, because he says such extraordinary things and says them in contexts that seem really inappropriate at times, and particularly into the circumstances of the television show, I couldn't help but think, well, who would say something like that? How would it come to them? What kind of person would be built in such a way that that's an okay thing to say at that moment? And when that starts to happen, and you can humanize them creatively with text like that, you start to build the framework backwards. And for me, everything, it seemed like a totally natural way of delivering the lines until, of course, you get in the company of other people and they're like, that's how you're going to do it? And I was like, oh, wait, that's not how I'm supposed to do it?
Do people do that?
Oh, all the time. I feel like since the beginning of my career as an actor, people would be like, man, that was really cool. I would have never thought of playing the character like that. And I was thinking, shit, I was just trying to do the character. I screwed it up again. That's not how you're supposed to do it. So I guess that's just an expression of my own creative imagination, for better or worse. And some people let me do it that way.
It's I don't know if this is the right way to put it, and I mean this as a genuine compliment. You know that I'm a huge fan. It's an offbeat rhythm that you find with the lines that shakes me as a viewer awake and makes me lean forward and be like, "What's he do? What's this guy doing now?"
Well, he's an operator that is making it up as it happens, and he's got a really, really big imagination and big intelligence, and he's capable of staying present in the moment, and it's a moment that is filled with chaos. So when you see me inventing it sort of in the moment, it's because I think he's a guy who is capable of inventing things that are that big and that hard to solve in the moment. And not many people rise to the occasion of exploiting the landscape of chaos so that they can rise and power and benefit their own motivations. And he's one of those guys who looks for the wreckage and finds a way to solve the problem. And that's an interesting person to play.
If you're shooting for the lowest common denominator, which I think often he is in terms of his audience, his viewership, you can sort of operate from that place. Whereas like all the other characters in the show have to be much more calculating, have to at least think that they're thinking 5 steps ahead. Whereas he can say, oh, there's the car accident. Point the camera at that.
Well, he also is aware, intuitively aware, as I think a lot of high-stakes poker players are, of other people's motivations. And his ability to use those to his own benefit, and he's guessing that he has the right take on people all the time. And there are people, there's a guy named Darren Brown who's doing a show on Broadway right now, and it appears to be magic what he's doing, but he will tell you straight up that he is using psychology and sociology as a way of making people think that something is happening that isn't happening.
Yeah, we had him here. He kept asking me questions, and I kept trying to back off.
See, there you go. And those kinds of people can be incredibly powerful, and they often end up as like cult leaders, sometimes as presidents, sometimes as artistic icons. But Corey is a straight-up capitalist. He is interested in the world of capitalism. It is where he has found his mark. And since he lives in a country and a culture that supports people operating in a capitalist system, he's got no reason to take a different approach. And I think he feels like there is something morally and ethically responsible about him exploiting the best of his own potential. And so if that is being a captain of industry, then so be it.
Well, like any sort of capitalist, he works for the shareholders, and sort of his morality and ethics are based around what is going to be the most successful thing for those shareholders. If this most successful thing is a danger to the people who are doing it or a danger to the public good, it doesn't really matter as long as that money still keeps coming in.
He's not your priest. He's not your father. He's not a teacher. And I can guarantee there are most people who are shareholders who, of any company or anybody who has a 401k, they would prefer to see that go up rather than down. Most people would tell you that they would also like for there to be some kind of moral or ethical framework to the investments. However, when it comes to saying, listen, we're going to give you this is an important stock for you to invest in because they're doing the right thing, and you keep losing money, it will test people's moral fortitude. So if you want to be a part of the capitalist system, you're typically engaged in the idea of growth. And since Corey has nothing but evidence that his version of growth works, then there's no reason he shouldn't be as confident and cocky and capable of his own aptitude, which he is, which is a really great, fun thing to play.
Yeah, you seem like you're relishing like a lot of the moments that.
Yeah, I mean, he's so much smarter than me. He thinks faster, he talks faster than I do, and it's all scripted for me. So all I have to do is do the homework and do the text work to make sure that I know exactly what I'm saying, and then the actual participation in that moment is just about, and it's why there's those kinds of weird line readings or whatever, because that's whatever's happening in the moment when we're doing the scene. And Corey's capable of being present in a way that I'm not totally. You know, he has these big ideas that he's able to bring to a conversation that seems like a pretty, I don't know, banal or regular conversation that all of a sudden seems strange and extraordinary. It's because Carrie Aaron has scripted it that way, and I've just worked to try to get myself to the place that I can be present in the moment. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
No, that makes perfect sense. You said that you've kind of been doing this your whole career with characters, and you show up, and sometimes you do it, and it goes well, or sometimes people question what you're doing. Has there ever been a character that you took what you didn't know was a big swing at, and somebody else was like, "That's a huge swing, Billy. Let's."
It happens so frequently that I don't even know where to start. When I was playing Fuckhead in Jesus' Son.
Oh, you know that's my favorite.
I'm really grateful. Immediately, the first day on set, I just thought he was a guy who kind of stumbled through the world, and so it informed the way that I walked and the way that I carried myself. But he was also a very hopeful person, so there was always a bright expression on his face, looking up as he kind of stumbled through the world. And we did the first take, and I think the director came up and said, "Are you going to keep walking like that?" And I was like, I think that's the way Fuckhead walks. I mean, isn't that right there in the text? And she was like, I guess so. And like, we had to live with it. I mean, there's no shortage of anecdotes of people saying, are you really want to do it like that? I mean, I've also been fired from jobs, so that would be an indication that my immediate response to the material didn't work. But what else are you going to do? Like, I'm still working, so that's good.
Yeah, of course you're still working. I would say that you're doing more than still working. You're a sought-after actor that people genuinely like.
Well, I had the benefit of really great teachers, and some of the greatest teachers that I had, they made a very interesting point, which was if you're going to be a performing artist or any artist, one of the best chances that you have to be successful is to exploit your own individuality. Mm-hmm. And the way that you do that is by not censoring your approach to material. Let your unconscious be the guide to your creative expression, and then let people receive it the way that they receive it. But you will be dead set on being one of a kind if you only use your own filter to interpret material. And I've tried to take that to heart when I can, and when people have given me the chance. Sometimes you have to just do the job. You have to tell the story in as simple a way as possible. So it takes a director saying to me, refine it, cut it down, cut that back.
But I think of a performance in a recent movie of yours, After the Wedding, where that is a very sort of straight and narrow man, almost just like a leading man who has really he has secrets, but he doesn't really have idiosyncrasies or quirks. So what is that for you at that point when you get to that?
Well, that is that was my idea for that guy. Is I couldn't wait to play somebody who was so grounded. Sometimes, and for me again, it was in the material. I don't being individualistic. Or being a representation of your own individual creativity doesn't mean that you're just quirky all the time. It means that you're going to the story.
I would also never define your performances as quirky, by the way.
Well, I mean, sometimes they are, because the text that you get, you think, oh, this needs a weirdo. Like this character, who else would say this? But somebody who is filled with tics, And I mean, the kind of adage is you bring a limp and a lisp to it, and you have created a character. And so there are some times that you see the way that it's written, and it may be like a broad comedy or something that requires that kind of approach. But with the guy in After the Wedding, my immediate response was, this seems like somebody who is completely grounded, capable, comfortable in their life, and it then gives them the opportunity for it to be fractured by this event. And Bart was one of those directors who was like totally on board with that interpretation. So it was the different side of the same coin.
Another film of yours that I absolutely love, it's basically like a warm blanket for me. I watch it quite regularly, is 20th Century Women. I just think it's such a beautiful film. I think it's one of Annette Bening's best performances.
Spectacular.
And it's another performance of yours that is casual and light and warm, unlike, you know, Corey, who's calculated and a different kind of thing, similar to Fuckhead maybe and Jesus' Son, in a way. What was it like doing that movie, and what did that script look like when you saw it? Because when I saw that movie, I was like, oh, this had to have come together during editing. How do you even write a script like this?
Mike is a really fascinating filmmaker, and I have tremendous admiration for him, and I loved working with him. He is, I mean, apart from being really ambitious as a filmmaker and having a very specific point of view and being extremely capable and exposing something vulnerable and personal, he's just a nice guy to be around. And
how important is that?
It turns out to be really important. You can get away with being a jerk a lot if you're producing really, really ambitious stuff that works all the time. But since nothing ever does, you really can't get away with being a jerk for too long. But Mike is a really, really phenomenal guy. And on the page, actually, I ended up reading 2 drafts of it. And the first draft, most of the things that were written for this character were in stage directions. He didn't talk much. It was just about the way that he moved. And I kind of said to Mike, I don't really know what to do with this guy. I don't know where he's coming from. And he said, well, which draft do you have? Oh, no, I was just fleshing him out at the time. Let me send you the next draft. So he sent me the next draft. And needless to say, he had grown a little bit in the way that he spoke, but he was still a very soft-spoken, capable, comfortable person in his own skin who didn't really need to say much. And I loved the idea, again, of playing somebody who was quite comfortable in their own skin.
Just good.
And just a good person. Like, he didn't have many complications other than the fact that he didn't really know how to get intimacy. That was the one thing that was eluding him. But it was only eluding him in like a soft way. He wasn't tortured about it. Yeah. You as an audience feel sympathy for him because you feel like he's just on the cusp of being close to people. But he doesn't live the life of a tortured human being. He's like a very tactile person, and so therefore working on things and fixing things is incredibly satisfying to him. So yeah, it was great to build that character with Mike.
What is it like when you see a cut of a movie like 20th Century Women for the first time? Because it is modeled off of something completely different. I think maybe the script was like that, but you still can't envision exactly how that's going to get pieced together. Whereas something like The Morning Show, you know, it is very, very much cut off of the script in a lot of ways. And I'm sure there are minor tweaks here and there. Maybe a scene gets moved around, but not like 20th Century Women, where it is a collage and lots of stuff could get shuffled around.
It's a little bit surprising because one of the things that you do as an actor is try to build on this previous scene before, so there's some sort of emotional or psychological trajectory for your character. So when the director like Mike then starts to invert scenes because he's interested in playing with time, the work that you did trying to set up one scene by playing it one way in the first scene is right out the window. So you look a little bit bonkers for choices that you make. But what you discover in the end is that ultimately it's in Mike's hands. Mike's going to be the one who's going to be curating the entire thing. So you let go of whatever possessiveness you had of your own performance, and then you end up being thrilled to be in something that ultimately, as an interpretive artist, all you want to do is be a part of somebody who is much more capable than you of being a part of their story. So I expect it to be something that I couldn't comprehend. Otherwise, I would be writing and directing shit myself. You know, like I can't. I've tried to write stuff before and it's terrible. Yeah, when you're not working as an actor, you need to find some creative outlet. And so you think, I know, I'll write the good part for myself. And 2 pages in, you're like, I am the worst. Let me go back to the agent. Hopefully I can get an audition and talk my way into something.
Did you ever write something to the point where you showed it to an agent or someone and they went,
Oh, no.
"You are the worst.
Never.
Do not show this to us."
No, definitely not. I deleted it from my computer. I threw my computer out and I got off the grid for a while. Yeah, it feels that bad. Well, when you've read stuff that's really good, you know, when I've done plays with Tom Stoppard, Martin McDonough, and people. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I get choked up when I talk about Martin McDonough with all the blood and gore. No, when you've read really good writing, it's impossible to sit with your own, like, very pedestrian attempt. And again, I count on being inspired by somebody else's story to awaken my own imagination and creative outlet. And I want to be a part of somebody else's team, you know.
Yeah. When you, how old were you when you got your first Sleepers? Was like right out of college, right?
I did one movie before that called Grind that Chris Kentis directed with Adrian Shelley and Amanda Peet and Paul Schulze and Frank Vincent, I think. I mean, it was such a charmed experience because it was my first time doing a film, and everybody was so generous with me. I played Fast Eddie Dolan. I don't know if you remember that. He was shortly out of prison and liked racing cars. He was a cool character to play. But I then after that did Sleepers, and that was being with Barry Levinson after I grew up on, you know, Barry Levinson movies was one of the most exhilarating experiences. And Dustin Hoffman was playing Ron Eldard and I's lawyer, and to be on a set with Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro, I was like I was just trying to stave off a blackout.
Kevin Bacon, Jason Patrick. I mean, and also the
Brad
kind
Pitt.
of Brad Pitt.
He's done okay.
I'm not really sure who he is, but
Yeah, he's a tall guy, good looking, great hair.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
He was in that Tarantino movie, right?
Keeps like kicking ass in every movie he's in. That guy.
That's the kind of movie one that just doesn't really get made anymore. I know that's kind of a cliche thing to say at this point, but what is it, like a $40 million drama with like a humongous cast with like absolutely beautiful setups and street closures all across New York City. You just don't really see that kind of
And
thing.
about like major trauma
Yeah.
that's being like a revenge drama too, that about some pretty insidious social
it's bleak.
issues. It's a tough movie. And no, I haven't seen a lot of those in the theaters lately.
How have you changed as an actor from that age, just out of drama school, to now? Have you changed in the sense? A lot of times you talk to actors who, after a couple decades, they settle into it and they still take it seriously, but they don't feel the need that they have to kind of like wrestle with the characters as much all throughout a performance. Are you of that as well?
I feel like, well, I mean, I'm clearly trying to. Well, I'm aging, obviously, to get older roles. That's the real thing. Is I'm getting the lines are going to get deeper. The grays are going to get, because I want those older parts. Those are the really rich ones. I feel like the thing that ends up growing the most in me is my curiosity about how little I know about it, and about how all of the tools that I've learned and cultivated in doing film and theater over the past 20, 25 years or whatever are really mine to use. I have a wealth of instruments that I can apply to things, and so finding a judicious way to do that with this storytelling feels like the next stage in my understanding and growth as an actor. That being said, it always goes back to the story. So when you can find material where you can utilize all of those things that you've learned, that's where you get, I think, really the best opportunities.
What do you think is the most common tool that you find yourself using over the years when it comes to collaboration?
An openness, really. I don't have. I'm not very protective, or I have an incredible audacity to have a point of view. I always come in with a very strong point of view, and I'll argue that point of view because it's probably the thing that I connected to in the material. But ultimately, what I want to be is a part of a collaborative enterprise. And so I would say that is the tool that has produced the best results for me, ultimately, because I'm not writing monologues for myself to do alone, or I'm not writing, producing, directing episodes that are starring me. I'm a part of other people's visions for what will ultimately be either a cathartic event for people or a mildly entertaining afternoon, curated by somebody else. So I need to be open to whatever their vision is, and I think that kind of curiosity and hopefully lack of ego enough. Like all of us actors, we've got a big ego, but trying to stamp that down enough so that you're open to hear what story you're telling is incredibly useful as you get older.
We talked about moments where, or performances where you came in with a big idea and it worked. Have you ever come in with a big idea and the director, and you said yes and you've gotten fired, but you didn't get fired, but their idea, you ended up seeing it on the screen and being like, oh, that makes sense. I happen to have been wrong.
That does happen, and it happens frequently. I'm trying to think of the best example at the moment. Nothing is coming to me right now.
If I jog my
Could
memory,
you list
I'm always
all
right.
my movies starting chronologically, and one of them will. Let me think about that. Well, actually, a play that I did recently, Harry Clark. I had a certain
Love
idea.
that play.
Thank you. I had a certain idea about that, but it was really David Cale and Lee Silverman who shaped what would become ultimately the performance of it. So my initial instinct about it was, I would say, markedly different, and it took 5 weeks really of adjustments, conversations, attempts to figure out the collective language before we settled on the thing that wasn't mine, it wasn't Lee's, it wasn't David's, it was somewhere in the middle. It was our invention, our interpretation of that play. And that to me is the best case scenario. I was wildly off, but I had an investment in the material. Lee had a vision for how to make that night an interesting night for people in the theater, and David had created it and was helping us to navigate his own material. So when that happens, it's especially when it works well in the way that it did with that, it's extremely satisfying. Even though I wasn't the one who invented that Harry Clark, I didn't feel possessive of it at all.
For those that don't know, Harry Clark was a one-man show that he did. It's about an hour.
And I just said I'm not doing one-man shows. Yes, it was somebody else's monologue. Yes, but it's true. It was a solo performance. That's the way I think of it. Yeah.
But it was incredible. I mean, it was an amazing performance. It oscillated between being hilarious and tragic, and it was just pitch perfect, especially the dancing all the time, which I thought was so funny when your character would break out into disco dancing.
He really loved dancing,
Yeah.
and that was fun.
Did you guys talk about, because you came in and I don't remember asking you about this, so now I will. Did you guys talk about Patricia Highsmith at all, or Ripley while you were doing it? Because there was echoes of Tom Ripley in that story.
Yeah, David. I mean, David is admittedly a fan of film noir, and admittedly a fan of Patricia, and so there's no question that he was interested in what his version of a film noir piece would be, albeit as a one-person show on stage. So he wanted to see if he could pull off one of those weird suspense dramas, and he writes, he's a monologuist, and he writes plays for himself. He just did the most beautiful one at the Public, You're Only Alive for a Short Period of Time. That was absolutely extraordinary. But he's been doing this for 20 years, and he just ended up writing this one, I think, as an exercise because he loves those kinds of movies, and he never wanted to perform it. In fact, when he wrote, this was really strange, but when he wrote the original play, on it, on the cover page, he wrote, starring Billy Crudup, directed by Lee Silverman, before any of us had been, and then he put it away for 3 years, and then the
And you
Vineyard.
met or worked with him prior to that?
Never. And he hadn't worked with Lee either. And so then the Vineyard Theater, which is the first place I ever did a play in New York, it was shortly before I did Sleepers. Wanted to work with David and called and said, "Do you have any material?" And he said, "Well, I do have this." And he sent him the thing, and they said, "Well, who would you want for it?" And he said, "Billy Crudup." And Doug Abel said, "Well, I've got his email. Why don't I just send it to him?" And so they did. And obviously, first I said, "No, that's a terrible idea. Why would I want to memorize 47 pages of something and play 15 different characters?" And then after a good night's sleep, I thought, well, who else gets a chance to do something like that?
Did someone have to talk you into it, or was
No. It was just my own competitive brain. Get off your ass. Come on. Who gets a chance to open a solo performance in New York? I mean, all of my friends are actors. I know the life of an actor. Nobody gets an opportunity like that. So for me, it was just my good fortune.
We have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who has a question? Right here. Hey.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. You kind of touched on this earlier, but for your character on the morning show, did you draw inspiration from anyone in particular who has that position? Or was there any other material that you read upon aside from the writing of the show?
Yeah, good question. It wasn't anybody who was a network executive that I drew that from. I imagined him as like one of those New York City anglers. He's a straight up hustler. And I've been in New York for 30 years, so I've met a lot of these guys. And they're in every different field you can imagine. In a city that is ambitious as New York, these kinds of people who can manage high-pressure situations and very powerful people with capability and with intelligence and charm, they're all over this town. And so there were three in particular. I won't name names because there are some aspects of Corey that maybe are not so pleasant. But they were idea guys, you know. Startups were a big thing for them for a while. Tech stocks were a big thing for them for a while. Real estate was really interesting to them. You know, they just moved from thing to thing to thing. And that kind of like facile person who doesn't mind trying to figure out something complicated in real time, there were about three of them.
Can also convince themselves right away that their idea is worth it and then sell it to somebody else.
Well, it's the same thing as when you don't have evidence to prove that your ideas aren't working, then you're going to keep being confident enough to stay on your message, you know. And Corey has yet, and certainly not in this show, he's yet to experience a downfall of any kind. Right. So he is just steeped with confidence. And so if the landscape changes, he believes in himself so much that he'll know how to navigate it. And if you watch him in the show, he's always watching everything. He is not a lazy person at all. He is a completely informed, intuitive person who's also trying to be predictive. He's trying to read what people are going to do, like this Darren Brown we were talking about before. He has certain assumptions based upon his study of people that they will act a certain way in certain situations, and he can leverage that for his own success. And so I see that a lot in New York and LA. I don't know if you've ever met any like guys who run agencies, you know.
Was your agent like, "Billy, this isn't based on me, right?" Please
No, it was
do
definitely
that.
not based on my agent, but I have met agents. And it's, you know what it is? It's mostly the people who run things. They have their board meetings are a rarefied air. Everybody in those things, they typically have a kind of confidence that they belong there, which is a really strange thing to experience. I mean, I don't have that kind of confidence about almost anything. You know, I get into a board meeting, I want to sweat. I remember the interview when I was going to try to get into this co-op, and I mean, I should have worn 4 layers, you know, because I was just sweating through one after the other. And those people in there, they're super confident. They feel like they're the president of the board for a very good reason, and you know they've probably been the president of other boards, and they're going to go on to be presidents of boards somewhere else. And they live in a very rarefied, confident arena.
Yeah, my main strength is self-deprecation, and that only works in certain circles that are fairly low on the totem pole.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I feel the same way. I feel completely self-conscious all the time, and it's one of the things, you know, I'm a very sensitive person. I feel very proud that I've been able to parlay that into a career of some kind. But mostly I want to crumble up and stay at home. And these people, that is not a feature of their personalities at all. They've either repressed that for so long that it's no longer even apparent, or they've had so much success that they've forgotten that most people go through life with little confidence at all, that it is a struggle to get through the day without ending up in a puddle of tears. And they're fascinating people to me. They're so foreign.
Before the last audience question, I do want to ask before I forget. There is a new Watchmen show, and you were part of Zack Snyder's original Watchmen. Have you seen the new show? Are you interested in seeing it? Does it worry you? What does it make you?
I have not seen it, and I'm totally interested in seeing it. First of all, I think the graphic novel is such phenomenal source material that not only should it be revered in its own regard, but explored, if possible, in other ways. And if you start off doing plays, you usually end up doing the classics. You know, you do Shakespeare or Chekhov or Pinter or Tennessee Williams, Sam Shepard. And those plays have already been done by hundreds of people before. So you don't feel so possessive over roles. I'm not very possessive over Dr. Manhattan. I want to see the next person's interpretation of him. Just being a part of the long line of people who gets to play those parts that's the cool thing there. So
I read a great story where when you got offered the part for Dr. Manhattan, you told your brother on the phone or something?
Yeah.
Or your brother's like, what part are you going to play?
Yeah,
you told him and he went, fuck you.
Yeah, that was
right?
exactly it. Well, my younger brother, Brooks, is grown up on graphic novels and absolutely adores them. And so when this came my way, Keanu Reeves, I think, was supposed to do it, and then he dropped out. And so I got a call to see if I would be interested in it, and I read it, and I thought, that's just phenomenal. It's like subverting the superhero genre. That's what I want to see. Like a guy who's an actual superhero. He has no interest in humanity. He just wants to go like to Mars and think about physics. That's killer. And the ones who are actually staying around in crime fighting, yeah, those are the psychopaths, the one who dress up and look for like crimes to solve. I thought, okay, great, that's really cool. But I wasn't really sure if Watchmen, where it existed in the pantheon of graphic novels. So I called my younger brother Brooks, and I was like, hey, man, what do you know about Watchmen? It's awesome. Yeah, well, they're going to make a movie about it. No way. Yeah, I got offered a part. Who? Like Mr. Manhattan or Dr. Manhattan? Fuck you. I was like, I'm going to take this part. I think it's good.
It's like the sign of approval, right?
That was it. That's when I knew. I was like, oh, he loves this, and he thinks it's badass, so I should do it. Yeah.
One more question from the audience.
Hi. You've been a part of so many projects that are so different from each other. Is there something very specific that you look for in every project that comes your way that makes you ultimately want to be a part of it?
It's a great question. And I look for that. Well, first of all, the story. It's got to be a story that I think at least has the potential to be original, interesting, rad, weird, something that sets itself apart from convention. And of course, not everything turns out that way. Sometimes you read a script that you think is completely original, and the movie itself ends up being pretty ordinary. And there's not much you can do about that as long as your intention is to be a part of something. The second is to work with people who are better than me, who have like generally done pretty incredible things, because you know that you will be forced to raise your own potential in their company. And the third is some insight into the character that they're offering me or that I'm going to audition for.
Have you ever had a moment where you were offered something, it seemed like a cool project, the people around it were smart and interesting, but you couldn't find an angle on the character? And
it happens a lot. Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to name which things, but there was one recently where everybody in it was super badass. The script was killer, and the part was cool as hell. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have that moment when I was reading it where I drifted off and started thinking and saw the guy walking in the world. I just couldn't see how it would manifest in my body and my voice. And if you can't ground your performance in some level of authenticity, even if it's an authenticity that people can't figure out, then I don't think you're going to have much success in that part. And again, even though I wanted, like I was so covetous of that experience, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do it as well as somebody else.
Is that the kind of thing where not being able to do it as well as somebody else is going to limit the experience that you're going to have on set because you're going to be doubting yourself? You're not going to be able to find yourself in the moment?
It's a really uncomfortable experience to do something that you know is not exploiting the best potential of the material. It's worse than a co-op board meeting. It sends me into panic attacks even thinking about it.
Yeah. Billy, I love having you here. It's
Thanks,
good to
man. I
see
love
you.
being here.
The morning show comes out November 1st on Apple Plus. Billy is an amazing part of that show. Please give him a huge round of applause for being here.